Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I'm sharing with you a project with these peg dolls, and I just showed you the finger puppet. We're going to be making the months of the year, and we're going to be putting little gnome hats on these peg dolls. Now I have a little pattern here, and you can find the link to that pattern in the description box below, but you do need to alter it a little bit once the hat is formed, and I'm going to show you that later on in the video. I'm showing you my new bundles of felt. They are just gorgeous. They're all from A Child's Dream. They're 100% wool felt. They are amazing. And they are really different from the, I think it's acrylic felt that you would find at the craft store. So if you've never tried wool felt, I really encourage you to try it out once. You will probably never want to go back to that acrylic felt, which is probably not good for your pocketbook, but they are absolutely gorgeous, really beautiful colors, and they hold up really well over time. They age really well. I've been making finger puppets and peg dolls for about 10 years now, and the ones that I've made with the felt, the wool felt, hold up really well. I'm showing you this Color Lab kit that I have. I'm dipping into my scrapbook supplies, and this is like some iridescent powder that I'm going to add to my Lyra watercolor paints in order to just kind of give these peg dolls a little something extra. This is totally optional. Now I also have some Mr. Huey's white opaque paint, and I'm going to use that a little bit for this project as well. And I've got this gorgeous little ceramic pot here as my water pot, and I also have my paintbrushes, and I want to take a second here to show you the one on the right. These are from Michael's, a local craft store, and they're kind of like a cheapy version. And then the one on the left is a really expensive version, and while the handle held up well with the expensive one, if you look at the paintbrush tip, the one on the left really frayed quite a bit, and I'm not sure if it began that way and it wasn't supposed to be a really angled tip, or because it just didn't hold up well, or because my children used it more and I used the cheapy one. But the thing is that sometimes you can find really good products at really affordable prices and you don't have to spend an arm and a leg for them. So that's just a side note. Alright, so we are going to be painting 12 peg dolls. These are, I think they're actually called the large peg dolls. I'm going to leave the dimensions down below in the description box so that you can get the correct ones if you are interested in doing this. And I'm adding a little bit of that powder there. A little goes a long way, and I did add too much. I just got a little overzealous. Now you can see it definitely when it's wet, but it really gets pronounced when it's dry. And it does slightly alter the color of the paint. You can see this is kind of almost a metallic red, but obviously not a pure metallic red. That's what they look like when they're dry. I went ahead and did all 12 in colors that coordinate with the autumn felt pack from achildsdream.com. I actually have 13 there. For some reason I just miscounted, which is fine. Got an extra one there. Alright, so here's the pattern. It's just a triangle, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that out of my wool felt. And to make the gnome hat, it's pretty straightforward, but it's not so simple. You're just going to kind of twist this like a cone, and you want to get the bead of glue just as close to the edge as possible. And I'm sorry that I was out of frame there a little bit, but I'm going to show you this again. Now don't worry about the extra glue that kind of seeps out. Wool felt is very forgiving, and you can just trim off that extra bit a little bit. I do like using hot glue because it's fast and it's really durable, but if you're uncomfortable using it, you can use a tacky glue. It's just going to take longer to dry. You just want to hold it in place. So I'm going to trim that down here. Now later I'm going to alter the pattern a little bit so that I don't have to trim that extra piece down. Now I got to this point and I thought, well, it's kind of cute with that little tail on the end, and I decided to keep that. But I'm going to alter it a little bit later on. I'm going to kind of explain that as we go along. But here is a closer look, or actually just another look at making those gnome hats. Now just to make a traditional gnome hat, you just want to cut off the tail at the very bottom there. I'm going to leave it on. It's kind of like a mullet gnome hat in a way, and at first I really liked them, but later I really didn't. But I won't be able to alter it once it's done, and I'm going to show you why in a little bit. So I went ahead and trimmed off a little bit of that extra glue. You don't always get extra glue on it. I was just, I did. Now this is something that you as an adult might have to do versus your child. If you're working along with your child, the painting is pretty simple for a young child to do, but the gnome hats were a little bit complicated. Now one of those gnome hats is a little extra long, and that's the thing, is even though I had a pattern and I cut them all the same size, sometimes they don't come out the same size, in part because it depends on how tightly you wind it as you're gluing the two pieces together. And so while a pattern is helpful, it's not going to be exactly the same every single time, so you will need to trim it down. Now, I could just trim straight across there and make it a traditional hat, which, like I said, I ended up liking a little bit better, but at the time I decided to try something different with these because I had just made the days of the week gnomes, and those ones had the traditional hat, so I thought I would do something different for the months of the year. So now I'm going to add some stitching along the edge here, and I'm using my embroidery floss, and I did not tie that off because I'm going to glue it in a second, but I decided to glue it at the end because I realized if I glued it right now to keep it from coming out, then I'd have to stitch through glue, and that wasn't going to be a good idea. I'm going to do a blanket stitch, which means you just have to loop through before you tighten your stitch, and I know this can be confusing. I'm trying to show you the best that I can. However, there is a video linked down below in the description box of another YouTuber's tutorial. She does a great job, and it's a lot slower and more descriptive, and so take a look at that if you're having a tough time with your blanket stitch. But it's a really beautiful way to add some detail to the edge of these hats, or just about anything. Now I'm going to glue off my ends rather than tying them off because this is really durable, and it's not going to show anyway because we're going to be gluing that part onto the peg doll. Just want to trim off that extra bit of embroidery floss, and then this hat is done. So the detail does take a little extra time, and I kind of go back and forth on whether I like it or not, or whether I want tone on tone or a little bit more contrast. At this point, you could do whatever you want. If you're trying to make this a fast project, then totally skip the stitching. Once you get started with the stitching, it goes pretty quickly. So I'm just going to glue the back piece on, but you want to kind of look at your little peg doll because they're cut out of wood, and you can kind of see some wood grain, and I kind of want the circular part of the wood grain to be the front part of the face, even though you barely see it at this point. The hot glue gun is going to work really well. My peg dolls and finger puppets get a lot of use from my kids, and they all hold up really well. Alright, so now it's time to label these up. Now I went ahead and wrote down the word so that I could position it in the center, so I could have half the letters on one side and half the letters on the other side. I want to make sure that I wasn't making any mistakes after all this hard work, so I went ahead and wrote that down first. And here's a look at them. I know they're not in order yet, but they will be in a second. And I really, really like the way they turned out, but I do not care for the mullet style gnome hats. But, you know, that's okay. I'm not going to go back and change those. My kids like them, and that's what counts. So here they are all in a row, and they are now decorating our homeschool room windowsill, where they're all lined up along with the days of the week and the days of the months and the seasons. And what my kids do is first thing in the morning they'll come in and they will trade out the day and the date, and that's like our little calendar there, and they really, really love it. Now, once we started using these peg dolls for our calendar, my 11-year-old son suggested that we write how many days are in each month at the very bottom of each of the peg dolls, and I thought that was a fantastic idea. So we went ahead and we added how many days are in each month, and that way, in case my kids forget, they can always look at that so that they know when to change out the month. So this is a little sneak peek at our days of the month. There were 30 of them, and you can see there was no stitching along those hats because this was a far more time-consuming project. Okay, so if you want to keep up with the projects we're doing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.